Okay, so I'm here at Toronto Audio Fest, and I'm usually a headphone and IEM person, and I went over to Irvana and spent a lot of time over there. But I really want to get into speakers because I also think they're really interesting, but I don't have the space or money to afford them. So I'm just going to explore, see some of the interesting speakers over here, and give you some thoughts about them. Like I said though, I'm definitely not a two-channel guy, so please forgive me if I don't seem to know what I'm talking about when it comes to speaker systems. All right, so the speaker I just heard was the Borresen M2. Altogether, that system was about 450 to 500,000 Canadian, but it sounded, I really like the sound of that, the timbre, the smoothness of it. The song they have playing on there right now is a very bassy, vocal-driven piece. It's a flex piece, really, for its bass notes that it has. And like I said, the smoothness of the timbre, the weight and the depth of the bass without subwoofers in the room is exceptional. The feel of the soundstage is amazing. It feels like a bit of a wall of music in a way that it's really enveloping, but at the same time, it doesn't feel flat at all. It just feels really nice. The imaging feels natural. It doesn't feel like really specific on one side. There's a nice diffusion of the notes. So really like that system. The timbre, like I said, is just excellent, especially in those bass notes. I'll have to hear more, something a bit more rocky, a bit more demanding, but from what I heard just now, fantastic. All right, so that was the Bliss Acoustics room, and that was the Audio Solutions Figaro M2. I think it's like a $20,000 speaker setup that they had there, but obviously all the accompanying equipment of it adds up to a lot more. You'll show you the list here. Now, Bliss Acoustics last year had a room there as well, but their speaker setup last year was 11 times more expensive. And I will say, from a sound quality difference, it really was 11 times, I don't know if it's 11 times better, but it's a huge world of difference in terms of the sound quality. This one was not bad. I will say the punch and the slam of the notes there was exceptional. We listened to Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. The way the notes came in, the bass notes was really crisp, really clean. Michael Jackson's Billie Jean has a ton of those really sharp transients in the notes. This one didn't have those really bright, sharp notes necessarily, so it was nicely controlled there. Pretty good mid-range timbre, although maybe a little bit on the brighter side. I do think that speaker system could have benefited from either a subwoofer, but really, more realistically speaking, the room was just too big for the system of that size. It should have been a bit of a smaller room. But otherwise, like I said, those bass notes, that's all I can think about. The punch and the slam and the impact of that was really good. The other really nice thing that I really liked about it was the harmonies in the vocals. The way it images with the harmonies, you can hear the sort of the stereo split in the harmonies that almost feel like they're one. So it's once again, really nice speaker presentation. I don't know if it's gonna make my top 5 list, because there's a lot more other speakers here compared to what I listened to last year, which was really one of the best things I've ever heard. That was over $1 million, but the expansiveness, the imaging, the clarity, all around is just exceptional. I think when I was talking to the Bliss Acoustics guys, they said they wanted to feature something a little more affordable this time around. Fair enough. And you know, when I saw that the price is 11 times cheaper, I'm like, okay, maybe they got a point here, right? But once again, really nice speaker, really liked it. I would compare it maybe a little to like the Focal Canto. Those had a little more boom and oomph in the bass, a bit more body than this one. This one's really more of that cleanness of the bass punch. And the Cantos also had a bit more sharpness in the treble, maybe a little uneven. This one didn't have that issue. So nice sound if you can get a nice small enough room for it, or possibly supplement with subwoofers. Okay, so that was just the Gershman Acoustics room over there. Every year I come over, I like to check them out because the first time I heard them, they had these really amazing speakers that had an unbelievable sub-bass presence and depth and just richness, especially into some cellos and violas. That was just phenomenal. But every year I come back, I think they have a different model. This time around, that model looks pretty cool. I liked how the speaker looked like. Unfortunately, the music that they played was just not demanding enough and not, I hate to say it, not interesting enough to really have anything much to say about it. What I will say is that I did feel the music was very effortless. It filled, the room they had was fairly large, and those speakers were not playing very loudly, but it filled the room effortlessly, and it just felt really clean and really, yeah, the timbre was good all around. But I think the treble was sort of bright, but also rolled off in a way, because there was a note where they like hit a bell, and you hear the initial transient, very clean of that bell-like whistle, but it just like rolls off really fast. So I don't really know what to think about that one. I wish they played something a little bit more demanding with a little more instruments too, so I could really get a better sense of it. But speakers are pretty cool. All right, so that over there was the Monitor Audio Hyphen. That is sort of their flagship system. In that room with the system setup, it did actually sound pretty good on the first few tracks that they played. The staging was excellent. It really feels very effortless with the dynamics, the control, really, really nice. The imaging was definitely a bit more spread out, so you don't get a super precise articulation, but it was done in a nice way that it doesn't smudge over each other. So it's really quite nice to listen to. However, they switched over to some kind of rocky track there. Nothing else matters. And that one, I think on that system, it didn't sound quite right for me, especially the kick drum. The timbre of the kick drum wasn't quite right for me. I think there's something with the, almost felt a bit woolly almost on that low end and maybe rolled off a little towards the sub bass. And then when the cymbal notes and the hi-hat notes came in, the timbre of the crash was just not right for me. I think it's just that song because what else they played there, they had some Leonard Cohen, Nothing Like the Blues. That was really, really excellent, and that really showed off the nice soundstage presence that it has, the nice imaging, the nice tonal control that that system had. So yeah, it's an interesting system. The way you can see it, the way it has, it almost has this like 6 drivers arranged almost in a slight hexagon pattern in the center, and then you have these woofers on the side that gives you that illusion, I think, of that stage and the depth to it. But if you're considering to get a system like this super high end, I would recommend that you at least try something rocky like on that system just to see how it handles it, because it can definitely do like that, traditional audiophile fare. Yeah, so I was just in the Audio by Mark Jones room over there, and they had the speakers called the Marten Mingus. It's a pretty funny name. And yeah, obviously Audio accompanying gear with that. I think those speakers come in at like $100,000 US or something. And I think it's like a Swedish brand. Anyway, my thoughts on those speakers are that I have mixed feelings about them. What I liked about them is that they feel very explosive. The sound of it is very explosive. We played Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven, and then Supertramp, apparently not the best recordings according to the guy in the room. I just wanted to show it off. Great. I love the fact that he actually played something challenging here. Very explosive when the instruments kind of builded and came in. You hear all the notes and there's a rawness to the sound. However, that rawness, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, especially in the treble region, because I found the top end, I found it a little bit too raw. So some of the hats and cymbals can be a bit too splashy, a bit too sharp, maybe a little metallic sounding in its character. Obviously hats and cymbals are metallic, but it just exaggerates it a little bit too much for my liking. But that being said, if you like that sort of raw, aggressive type of sound, I think those speakers actually do quite a good rendition of that. Like, I don't think it sounds bad, it's just a different presentation, right? The bass region, I do think for the size of the room, it was a very nicely sized room for those speakers, but I think I could have used some subwoofers in there, because I think having a couple subwoofers would have filled in the room just a little bit more for that low-end richness and presence. But the mid-bass region was really nice, really punchy, really dynamic. Like I said, very explosive with the music and the instruments. One thing I didn't really like about it, and where I'm starting to get mixed feelings on, is the imaging. I felt that you really had to sort of sit in the sweet spot for that one. It didn't image very high up. Yeah, so you really sit in the sweet spot for that one. I didn't find the stereo image to be particularly precise. So you obviously you have left and right, but it wasn't like the notes are super sharp and distinct for me. And I just found that when all the instruments sort of came together, they all kind of melded a little bit together in the image. The note, like following each note and following each instrument, the lines of them, no problem whatsoever. There was clarity there, but the actual image itself, I found it just sort of blended in together. So I would have preferred something where the imaging's a little bit more distinct overall. But as a whole, I did like the system. I did like the rawness it presented, even if it perhaps went maybe a little bit too much in one direction. So that was the MonAcoustic booth, and that was pretty interesting because MonAcoustics it's a brand from Korea, and then a system that they were using was Burmester from Germany, I believe. And what's interesting about that system is that you could sort of see there was sort of 2 modules to it. You have almost like bookshelves at the very top, and then you sort of have this bass module below. And you could set the bass module such that what they call is a 3.5-way and 4-way design. So you can actually physically change the crossovers directly on that system. And it actually does have a pretty interesting impact. So we were listening to some Billie Jean, I requested that song. And with that system, when you have it on the 4-way, it sounds definitely a lot more neutral, a lot more even keeled. It's a system that definitely needs, I think, a bit of a subwoofer, because some of those bass notes with Billie Jean, you could tell it sort of roll off in just the bottom end, right? But otherwise, it does sound pretty good. I think it's a system that tries to go for a good amount of coherency, but I do think the top end is also rolled off a little. So you don't get some of that really sharp transients that Billie Jean is known for, but it's not like it's lacking sparkle. I think the mid-range, just in the lower mids area, might have just an extra hump there, so you do get a little bit of extra warmth, not necessarily to the point of bloom. So it's definitely not like dipped or anything in there where you get that clarity boost from that dip. But when you switch it to the 3.5-way with the crossover design, what happens is that it it actually moves the soundstage forward because, like I said, it makes it more colored. It definitely brings the bass up, but by doing so, it pulls that soundstage forward and it gives it a pretty different feel and presentation overall. For Billie Jean, I think for that song, I feel like you could go either way with that one, especially in that room that I had in, which was a pretty small room. But when we switched over to Polyphia's Playing God, and that track, I think, definitely worked better with the four-way crossover design, where it's a lot more neutral and more even keeled in its tonality, because otherwise it would have been too boomy, and that would have, colored up and eaten up some of the clarity in the lower mids region, affecting some of the crispness and the plucking of those strings. In terms of soundstage and imaging, the room was small, so it's hard to really get a good sense of how wide the soundstage truly is. It definitely filled out the room, but I did feel it's a little directional. I had to sort of sit in the sweet spot, right? And the imaging, I wouldn't say it's like certain speakers where it's meant to be super duper precise and super articulate with the imaging. It is a little more diffused, a little more, it's in the area, but not like super duper sharp, which I think for some types of music, some people kind of like that. I like a little in between. I like it where it's a little more articulate, not so much where it feels almost surgical and almost artificial in that sense. So a little bit of, cross-feed blending sort of thing. Anyway, cool speaker with a two-tier design from Korea and paired with the Burmester system. Okay, and so that was it for Toronto Audio Fest 2025. It was a ton of fun. I spent most of my time at Nirvana, more time than I probably should have, because I didn't have as much time as I wanted to with the speaker side of things. But definitely next year I'm going to try and come back again and see what other really fun and really interesting speakers there are, and hopefully learn a little bit more about how I can better explain and go over some of the gear and the systems to give a better showcase of them for the future. All right, take care.